It's Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs. Let's start the show with Lewis Tennant. Here we go. Guests and interviews that you're looking for with creators, innovators, and so much more. For all episodes and further info, verbalhighs.com is the place to go.
Welcome to Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs podcast from a slightly lockdown fatigued bubble in Tamaki Makaurau, Auckland, New Zealand. My name is Lewis. I'm the host of the show. I will not dwell on bubbles or coronavirus or Delta today. As comes up in this episode, there's enough discussion of coronavirus in other media currently. My guest today, before my guest today, thanks to my ongoing supporters, Free FM, independent access radio in the mighty Waikato, who, in these, last mention of coronavirus, I promise, in these corona-weary times, presenting information and news about said viral outbreak in a way many other of the larger media outlets are not. For example, there are daily updates in 9 Pacific Island languages, something you'll hear across many of the other access radio stations in other localities in New Zealand. You can find programming from a wide range of New Zealand communities and voices at freefm.org.nz. Speaking of a voice of New Zealand, or one of many voices of New Zealand, my guest today is Reece Reilly, who is a Hamilton-based podcaster who presents Kiwi Talks, a podcast that, quote, guests from New Zealand and overseas talk about their particular field of expertise on. That was grammatically iffy, but I'm going to leave it there. And he, in fact, on the episode today, it is literally a Kiwi talking, because Reece, as he conceives himself, doesn't often to get to open up about the topics that he does on the show. Quite New Zealand-based topics they were, politics, culture, and society here in Aotearoa. Actually, I think he talks about his thoughts about New Zealand being called Aotearoa, in fact. It's something he doesn't normally have room to do on his show. And look, it turns out, I think, and probably when the fact that I vote Green came up to try and get that 5% representation in Parliament in New Zealand came up, Reece probably thought that probably doesn't vote Green. And I think we've got quite a few different outlooks on a number of things. But I mean, my whole take on the show has always been to sit people down and let them stretch their legs metaphorically and open up about themselves and their perspective on the world, rather than that attack dog style journalism that's become quite prevalent and often quite toxic in our more widely consumed media outlets of late probably being, for decades now. I kind of tried to, I offered broader context for a lot of the stuff Reece spoke about, some of my own perspectives at points, but as Reece says, when he just discussing some stuff around, for example, Māori healthcare, you can't even talk about this stuff because people start calling you racist. So probably a good opportunity for Reece in the show, as I say, to provide the perspective of a Kiwi talking from Hamilton, New Zealand. You can find his show Kiwi Talks, that's with a Z, bloody hell, I'll just spell out Kiwi, I'll do it now, Kiwi, just in case you wouldn't have got there on your own. Talks with a Z, Talkz. There you'll find the audio-only podcast and his YouTube channel, which is getting a lot of hits, numbers, views. Please like and rate the show, subscribe and share via one or more of the following services: Verbal Highs on Twitter, Verbal Highs Podcast on Facebook, Verbal Highs on Apple and Google Podcasts. You can also stream via Spotify, iHeartRadio, and you can find the Verbal Highs headquarters on the internet at verbalhighs.com. That's also where you'll find Reece's show, Kiwi Talks, amongst many others in my New Zealand podcast directory, now up to about 400 or so shows at last look. It's a constant game of whack-a-mole. Here is Reece from Kiwi Talks.
This is Dr. Tennant's Verbal Highs.
Hello.
Hi there.
Hey.
So
there.
I must have had a senior moment, because I thought that I just give people the number and then it tells me they're waiting to come in, but turns out I have to start a meeting. So here we are.
Oh, I must have logged in before you.
Yeah, I know, but I'm sure normally it gives me, okay, I must know that next time. Anyway, so you were probably going, I hate people who are late. And I was going, man, people who are late kind of annoy me. And then it realized it was me. Yeah.
That's all right. I did a podcast last night, and he had gone into Google Meet, Meet, I think it is, rather than Zoom.
Yeah.
And I was like, what's up with this guy? Why is he like so long, like being late? Because it was like 15 minutes late. Yeah. And then I was trying to get a hold of him, and then finally he emailed me, and he was like, "Oh, are you joining the meeting?" I'm like, "You're in the wrong app."
So how did he even think he was near what you do in an app that you don't use?
I don't know. He's obviously, well, I would think he was pretty tech savvy, but obviously not.
I think that this whole experience we've had will speak to all audience members listening, because this is life these days. It's not just the life of a podcaster. It's the life of anyone who does any kind of interaction through work in lockdown. You messaged me on one platform, and then I replied, and then you replied on another platform, and then I replied to that, and then we had the classic 3 conversations going. But yeah, man, how's lockdown treating you?
Oh, it's okay. I'm just taking it one day at a time, I guess. Yeah, it is what it is. Can't really do much about it. It'd be worse if I was in Auckland, so I can't really complain.
Are you near an airport?
No. Someone is mowing the lawns right now.
I've heard this happen on, I listened to you, I don't know if you listen to Mark Maron, WTF, but you know that show? Mark Maron's show?
I don't think so.
Anyway, he's one of the big US guys, right? And wow, that's very loud. And I've heard this happen on his show, but unlike mine, it's going out to, I don't know how many listeners those guys get.
Yeah,
you reckon it's in the hundreds of thousands? I mean, we know Rogan does, but those big American shows have got to get in the hundreds of thousands, right?
Oh, they get crazy numbers, absolutely crazy numbers. Yeah. I'd kill for those numbers.
Yeah. Well, you must realise that, it's the tyranny of geography, right? I mean, you're just not going to get those sort of numbers as a New Zealand show generally, because it's a numbers game, right? With my show, I know what I'm doing and who my guests are. That. If I were, say, based in LA or New York, I'd probably have the numbers relative to what I'm getting here to be able to get, monetize it and all of that. But I see your guests are more general than mine, though. So I think that probably helps if you're looking for a broader audience.
Yeah, well, the plan for me was always to be global, not local.
Yeah.
I merely used local as a way to kind of fine-tune things, worked out what worked, what things I could improve on, and that was kind of the process. Yeah.
And so you think you'll change the name eventually then?
I don't know. I don't know what I'm going to do yet, because I'm still a Kiwi and I'm still talking.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's right.
So, yeah, and that was something I thought about when I first started it. I was thinking, do I change the name later on? Do I keep it like this? But, yeah, so I don't know. And then if I was to change it, I don't know what I'd even change it to. Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, no, that wasn't... by the way, that wasn't a criticism of the name. I just thought when you were saying that, if you wanted it to be global. But then you're right, you are the host and you are the Kiwi, so perhaps that is the selling point for... people listening from overseas, especially now New Zealand's more on the map than it was, 10, 15 years ago for things generally in the creative and media realm, right?
Yeah, for sure. With me online, I actually get referred to as Kiwi.
Yeah.
I don't get referred as my name.
Yeah.
So in that sense, I'm kind of like, well, maybe I should just keep the name, because it's obviously going to become somewhat of a valuable IP perhaps in the future.
Great.
So it's one of those things. I mean, I never really had some massive plan when I started this thing. I kind of had an idea of where I was going to take it, but as things go, things have changed. I kind of feel like, because I've been doing this 2.5 years now, I think 2019 was the kind of the training wheels starting out phase. Then 2020 was me trying to work out what I was going to do, and with COVID, the transition phase, and I kind of feel now I'm just hitting my stride.
Well, I think wanting to go global from the beginning is a huge ambition and plan, man, because also it flies against, the majority of podcasts that keep a regular audience, which is that kind of like mile deep, inch wide, with shows like Rogan and those other big shows kind of being the anomaly. So to want to do that I think that's a huge ambition from the start.
It's easier said than done, though.
Yeah, but the thing is, if you materialize something or visualize it or whatever the word is, then you're partway there,
Yeah, I mean, I do agree. But when I started this thing out, I was trying to work out, I'm like, well, how do I diversify myself and separate myself from everyone else? Because it's getting to the point where podcasting it's becoming a bit oversaturated.
Yeah.
There's so many podcasts, right?
Yeah.
But then I think one of the biggest flaws I see that people make is they don't realize how much time and effort it takes.
We'll get to that. I've got that on my list for you.
Yeah. And consistency, right?
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, they're like, oh, yeah, I'm going to start a podcast. And then they get to episode 7 and they're like, oh, the hell with this. Yeah. This is way too much effort for very little reward. Yeah. But it's a slow game. It's a slow, long game. Right? You're not gonna blow up instantaneously.
And what you've probably found from talking to guests is, and I've found this from listening to podcasts as well, in terms of people talking about their career in any realm, is generally a lot of things are a slow game. I listen to a lot of those comedian-based podcasts in the US and the UK, and a lot of those guys get really big, like 10, 15 years in,
Totally.
They're just living on doing gigs in podunk nowhere to like 8 people for 10, 15 years, and then suddenly it kind of all comes together. And even then it's only for some of them, so. Yeah.
And I think some people get disillusioned by the whole fact that you only see the success stories as well. You only see the success stories. You don't see all the people that fail, right? Like you see all the success stories with like comedians, for example, Bill Burr, Russell Peters. But there's heaps of people that will have failed along the way. And I'm very much an advocate of the saying, insanity is doing the same thing over and over, expecting a different result. So if you're doing something for a substantial amount of time and you're going nowhere, then maybe look at something else. In the case of the podcast, I can see the trajectory and I can see that it's going up. So I know I'm on the right path. But like before doing podcasting, I did music production. Yeah. And I was heavily involved in music, and I did that for quite a long time. I think about 6-7 years. Yeah. And it went nowhere. So, and I'd already made a decision in my head. I'm like, if I haven't reached where I want to reach by this time, then I'll move on to something else. And podcasting was the way to go. So, yeah.
What was your kind of journey to starting the podcast? Was it a result of listening to a bunch of shows, or like what made you kind of go, right, I'm going to do this?
It was just, I felt like a natural evolution of what I was doing. So I had a music background, so I'm pretty thorough when it comes to audio. I know the ins and outs of it. I've done music videos, so I knew about video. I'm quite extroverted, so I like talking and I like meeting new people. Yeah. So I just kind of felt like the next natural evolution from that. And I thought I could do it in a way that other people weren't doing it, at least in New Zealand. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's that?
And, what's that? Well, I suppose the diversity of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I can speak to people from multiple different backgrounds, and I don't find it jarring. Yeah. Yeah. So I know I don't know if it's just from the way I grew up or being around different cultures. My partner's Indian, so maybe that has something to do with it. But like I can switch quite easily. Yeah. And maintain that narrative. And that wasn't something I realized I had until other people started pointing it out.
In the when you'd started doing the show, or as a general personality trait beforehand?
As a general personality trait, yeah.
Great. It's probably a pretty handy trait to have, right? Because a lot of our woes in the world are because people don't have that trait and they're really blinkered and kind of closed off in their circles. I mean, we live in
we live in the era of echo chambers. That's the thing. Yeah. You find your little tribe and you stick to it. And unfortunately, what happens as a result of that is you become quite narrow-minded, and you think that your way is the only way.
Yeah.
I think it's always important to try and meet new people and gain perspectives on things. That's why traveling is so good. I mean, you can't do it at the moment, but it really broadens your horizons. And when I say traveling, I don't mean like going to a country and then going to all the tourist destinations.
Yeah.
That's like window shopping traveling to me. That's not actual traveling, because you're not indulging in the culture. You're not learning anything, because you actually maintain and you learn a lot about yourself by experiencing new things. So like that happened for me. So my partner's Indian.
Yeah.
So I made a conscious decision when we went to India, I think back in 2017 or 18. But I made a conscious decision. I was like, I'm going to do stuff. I'm going to do everything, even if I don't want to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I'll hate it, because India and New Zealand, like, you can't find any country that's more different than New Zealand. There is literally nothing the same. So,
whereabouts in India?
So we went to Baroda, which was her home city, and then we spent a bit of time in Mumbai as well.
You know, I always default to food when I talk to people about places I've not yet been. In such a big country, there's so much regional variation, and a lot of the Indian food we get here that's public-facing is quite particular, as is with a lot of ethnic food. For a whitey palate, what kind of food was it? Did she grow up with?
Well, ironically, I can't really handle my spicy food. So, like, I had a few problems there, but in her state of Gujarat, it's quite a religious state, and they don't eat any beef, so it's primarily vegetarian. Which I don't have a problem with, actually. As long as it tastes good.
Indian vegetarian food's stunning, man. Some of the best.
It totally is. So, I mean, I couldn't tell you what the names of them are. My missus cooks heaps of different Indian food all the time, and I don't even know what it is.
So if she,
I'll eat it.
So if she cooks a whole lot of Indian food and you're averse to spice, does it kind of mild takes on that food?
Well, ironically, she can't really handle spicy food either.
There you go. It's beautiful.
Yeah. So it works out. But I mean, there's this funny story. So I was getting annoyed with eating so much spicy food. I'm just like, I need something just not spicy.
Yeah.
So I went to this Italian restaurant.
Yeah.
And I ordered some pasta, and the pasta had spices in it.
It's the modern world we live in, man. That's fusion. That's fusion, baby. So what were you listening to coming into starting the podcast? Because for me, you know, I basically started listening to them, I reckon, around 2015, and then it just like hit as a thing that I still spend hours of the week doing. But it was particular shows that particularly inspired me. Like, what inspired you coming on in, host and show-wise?
I think Joe Rogan was a big one. I mean, even if you like the guy or you don't like the guy, I think to deny what he's done for the podcasting platform in general is pretty massive. Yeah. I don't listen to him much these days because he's gone in a direction that I'm not really
it's strange. That's strange, eh? Yeah, he has.
Yeah,
but I think he's got that fuck you money that they talk about now. So, you know, him and Dave Chappelle are like very cashed up and just having a good time together at the moment, I think.
Oh, yeah, man. I mean, people hate on him because he took that $100 million deal with Spotify, but I'm like, come on.
I hear you with the hate around him in general, and the way that the discussion outside of people who have at least listened to a few hours of shows is different to what's actually going on in them really speaks to the difference between podcasting and that kind of soundbite media, because really, and I know I'm totally preaching to the choir here, like very small snippets of much broader conversations are so often taken out of context by reporters. Oh, God, and also I think in a world, I can't remember, you might have mentioned this before, something similar to it, in a world where we're quite kind of factioned and we're in a like, are you this or are you that world, when you listen to a lot of his shows, it's really clear that he's part of his appeal is that he is really broad-minded. And so people think he's this very narrow-minded kind of whatever right guy, but he's actually, the irony is, he's far more broad-minded than a lot of his detractors.
But there is something that he does, which I find quite hilarious, is that whoever's on his show, he will agree with their viewpoint. then he can have someone else who's opposite to them.
Yeah,
and then he'll agree with their point. And I look, to be honest, I think that's a good way of doing it, because what he's trying to do is he's trying to extract as much information out of the guests as possible and make them feel at ease.
Yeah,
and do that by trying to pick a fight with them. I get the impression that he's got his 100 million and he's just riding it out.
Yeah,
he's just cruising off into the sunset. I don't think he cares too much, and he doesn't probably fully understand the gravity of the role he plays.
Totally.
Probably still views himself as like a funny comedian.
Yeah.
And I get that.
Well,
but unfortunately, when you have a platform of that size, and there's some people that just, they worship celebrities and people who have millions of followers, and they're like, oh my God, and hold on to every word they say like they're Jesus or something.
We won't spend another half an hour on Rogan, but you bring up another funny thing I find about him is that you have these people in life who, like, their identity is tied up in this main thing that they're not actually, like, really special or amazing at. Like, he's not actually a particularly gifted stand-up comedian, but that is his main part of his identity. No, he's like, And I mean, even though I know it's not kind of comedy for me, I feel I can evaluate whether someone's a good comic or not. But again, it's worked for him. So, but I definitely think if I were him, I'd be hanging my boots on being, one of the greatest podcasters ever before I would put myself in with Bill Burr et al.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. So, I noticed, I guessed it was Rogan based on the sort of guest you're getting, as well as your New Zealand flag in the background in the episode.
So obviously it's not the case at the moment, because I had a studio, and then my studio was in my house, and we're in the process of building a new house. So I'm kind of here, there, and everywhere at the moment. So I don't have a studio, so I'm just operating out of a bedroom. So I wanted to still keep the New Zealand flavour there.
Yeah.
Because there might be people who watch it as opposed to just listen to the audio. So so I was trying to keep that distinctive New Zealand flavour, but putting a spin on it. But what I'm finding more and more is most of my audience aren't even Kiwis now.
Yeah,
it's more Americans more now. So that's why it's like, well, do I still cater to Kiwis? Or do I focus on more of the international market?
And what do you put that down to? Like the growing or the larger American audience aside, obviously, from the population difference.
They're more supportive, to be honest.
No. How did they come to your show?
Well, the thing is, my podcast has been referenced and on numerous international publications.
Great.
Like huge amounts of international publicity I've gotten from it.
Yeah, so how did that happen?
Just people picking up sound bites, not sound bites, more like video snippets, and then forming articles out of it. And I've formed a lot of connections through that.
Sorry, I don't understand. What do you mean articles? Like?
So there was one I did recently with a guy named Mike Wicken.
Yep.
So he was a game developer that worked on a prestigious Nintendo franchise called Metroid Prime.
Right.
Anyway, he's no longer there. He works for a company called Booz Allen Hamilton, which is a top 500 company, Fortune 500 company.
Yeah.
And he oversees a lot of game design to help with military applications and health applications to train nurses in military. But anyway, we did a whole show for like an hour, and he actually got into the intricacies of game design, business, and management. And a number of gaming websites picked that up. Like there were about 100 gaming websites. Some of them like were in Japanese and Spanish and so forth, and they did all these articles.
Great. So it's based on, this is what I suspected to begin with, it's based on the guests that you've had that are international, someone else kind of picking up on that as well and spreading the word.
There's the odd time where I might, because I know a few journalists now overseas, so if I get something that they might find relevant, then I might send it to them. But like, I've tried to do the same thing here, and I just get really angry with New Zealand media because all they want to talk about is COVID, housing, and politics. That's it. But they're not interested in anything else. And like they don't support New Zealand shows. What happens here is Kiwis don't actually support Kiwis until they blow up internationally.
Yeah.
With Peter Jackson, it happened with Lord. It's happened with Israel Adesanya. Like they just wait until they're international, and then they're like, "Oh yeah, we supported you the whole time."
So the publications in the States, though, are they of a similar area of the media as our main media here? Because surely over there, right? So because we don't have as many smaller publications, I'm just guessing here that if a podcaster in the States tried to get, I don't know, the New York Times or whatever to share something about their podcast, it would be just as difficult. Are you looking for smaller media outlets here, like specialist animation websites?
Yeah. So if it's a specialist website, so if it's gaming, then there's a number of gaming ones. If it's anime,
but I'm saying in New Zealand, have you approached them and they've still gone, whatever?
Yeah.
So it's the same. That's interesting, man.
Yeah. And sometimes it's I don't know. You can send information to a journalist and they still don't do anything with it. It's just I don't know what their framework is. I don't know what, like, is it all just clicks? Because it's just depressing to look at New Zealand media, because a lot of it isn't even news. I mean, and this is not just New Zealand. I mean, it's worldwide. But like, I'm tired of going on New Zealand Herald and stuff and News Hub and just reading an opinion piece that's supposed to be news.
Yeah, but if you go, since stuff was sold a little while ago, if you dig a little deeper on stuff, their investigative team's really strong at the moment. A lot of the multimedia stuff they're doing is really great. Long form is better than it, I think, has ever been on stuff. I don't know so much about the Herald, but, and RNZ are doing good things as well, especially in the digital realm.
I like RNZ.
But I think a lot of really good journalists in New Zealand get quite tainted by people assuming that there's not people doing good stuff, because there really are. Well,
it probably just gets buried amongst all the other stuff. I mean, I don't know how many articles there are a day on COVID, or, I mean, housing is just...
COVID. There's a fatigue with that, eh? Like I just try and keep up with the basics. With the I've even forgotten. It's one of the words I've heard the most in the last 2 years. I've just forgotten it. With the plague, what's the word of the plague I'm looking for? The pandemic. The plague's very like lots of dead rats in London and Victorian era. I just try and keep up with as much of it as I can to be informed, making good decisions and so on. But I agree with you. Like, I try to flick on the news most nights, and I've just been turning it off lately because, like you say, at least have one special like nice fluff piece at the end. Hasn't an animal been born at the zoo or something?
Well, yeah, and I just. I don't know, like, I don't know what your views are, but I feel like democracy isn't even really democracy anymore. I think people have been fed a rhetoric by the media, so people are made to believe that National and Labour are the only people you vote for because they get all the media attention. Yeah. If you actually wanted democracy to be fair and impartial, you'd actually have to give all the separate parties the same amount of airtime.
Yeah.
But we don't. What we do is we give it all to National and Labour, and then all the other parties get the breadcrumbs. And it's even more prominent during elections.
Yeah.
Debates. Like the debates, they have Labour and National, and then they have the others as a separate thing. You actually need to have all of them combined. Put them all on the same playing field.
Would you be old enough to remember pre-MMP days where you'd have that coupled with the fact that, even if you didn't get enough votes percentage-wise around the country, you'd end up being the ruling party with no one else? How old are you?
It's probably... I'm 35.
35. Okay, so my first time I voted, I'm 44. First time I voted was, I'm going to hope somewhere around here, I think it was 96 would have been the election. And that was the first year that MMP came in. But yeah, before that, Parliament looked very different. So at least we get representation that way. And, it's funny with that media, with your example, like, Chloe Swarbrick, who's the MP in my area, like I normally, I don't mind telling people who I vote for. I normally party vote Green because my thing is that the environment's the only thing that's not man-made construct. The planet is in peril. But anyway, my party vote, my electorate vote normally goes to the candidate that I think is going to be the best candidate for my area. And she just did this amazing campaign where, like, I don't think I would have voted for her 2 weeks out, but she did actual representative politics and got round a whole lot of places in central Auckland where I am and kind of made it really clear what she was going to do. And I thought, wow, that's a real politician, you know, working their boots. Do you even know who your MP is?
There's a number. Well, I've moved so much over the last 6 months that I've lost track. Jamie Strange is our MP here in Hamilton East. Yeah. He's a Labour MP.
So you're from the Tron?
No, I'm from Auckland.
Yeah.
I only moved because Auckland went from being the city of sales to the city for millionaires. Yeah. So, you know, I wanted to buy a house and I couldn't do it there, so I moved down here and I managed to buy something. Thank God I bought it when I did. But the only reason I left Auckland was because I couldn't afford to live there. Totally.
To be fair, though, the city of sales is named after a pursuit that the majority of Auckland's never been able to afford. You know.
Oh, it's far worse now, though.
Agreed. Yeah.
Far worse. I remember traffic when I was growing up there, and it was nothing like it is now. Yeah. And house prices were nothing like they are now. I mean, I've got so many friends back in Auckland, and every time I go back and see them, it's like I've gone back in time. Yeah. Because they're still in the exact same place they were like 6 years ago.
And so what's the, does the Tron,
a hamster on the wheel.
Does the Tron have a tagline? There's the Garden City in Christchurch.
City of the Future.
City, that's right. The Tron, that's how it got the name the Tron. I thought the City of the Future was like a kind of 7 days tag on Hamilton. And what took you down there? I mean, you've said why, the reasons for leaving Auckland, but obviously when you decide you're going to leave Auckland, you have to decide where to go.
There were two main reasons. One, I already had family down here living in Cambridge, so that was a big one. But the second one was I could foresee a lot of growth happening here.
Great.
That was the main thing. So from a investment standpoint, it made sense. And there's a lot of stuff going on here that a lot of people don't know about. Yeah. That it doesn't really catch mainstream media, but like there's a lot of development going on here. That Auckland to Hamilton corridor, there's more investment in that. Like Sleepyhead are building their massive factory just a little bit outside of Hamilton. Yeah. Tainui are building this massive inland port that's the size of Auckland CBD. It's supposed to create about 10,000, 20,000 jobs. The government have invested heaps into it. It's absolutely ginormous.
Great. And so why is all that stuff really important to you? Are you looking at investing in stuff? Because I'd sort of look for what's going on in a city culturally and those sorts of things. I mean, obviously, if I needed work, I'd look at that kind of stuff as well. But why was that a key selling point for you?
Well, it's just thinking about the future and investments and so forth. I mean, I don't even know if I'm going to stay in New Zealand, to be perfectly honest. Yeah. Me and my partner have talked about what we might do in a few years because, I don't know if I want to stay here. I don't know if I want to go to Australia. If some opportunity comes up overseas, that's part of the other reason why I like speaking to international people is because you build connections that way.
Sure.
You're building connections with people that probably no one else in New Zealand has a connection with. Yeah. So if an opportunity comes up to work in another country with that person, or they know someone who knows someone, then they can make it happen. So
in the podcasting realm, if something came up, or just you're kind of open to anything.
Anything. I'm a jack of all trades. I can do heaps of stuff. So I mean everything I do on my own. I can do visual effects. I do music. Obviously, sure. I know how to mix. And I've done like courses in business, and most of the stuff that I know how to do, I've taught myself.
Great.
So there's heaps of different stuff I can do.
Because I was going to say, the great thing now is that the podcasts, I mean, it's like everything, there's pros and cons. So one thing that's happening with podcasting at the moment that I'm a little wary about is the amount of kind of big media outlet kind of fodder where they're like, let's get celebrity A and topic B and, see if we can get big audience C. But in tandem with that is there's actually a bunch of really good looking roles coming up globally in companies that are trying to make podcasting a part of their media arm or their media company moving forward. I've seen some great roles. I mean, Netflix having a podcasting division now is quite nuts, right?
Yeah.
It goes to show that it's obviously, because I mean it is a very, very new medium, and it'd be interesting to see where it goes.
It is here. It's been in the States for years. That's the thing. Like, it's still very much in its infancy here. I mean, there's still a lot of people I speak to and they're like, podcasts.
Oh, no, but I mean relative, like if you look at the numbers in the States and globally, like relative to potential number of audience in terms of how many people in the US consume media, even now, even with your big shows, your Rogans and so on, podcasting has huge amounts of room for growth.
Oh, definitely.
Interestingly, one of the countries in the world that has the most, overall percentage of podcast listeners is South Korea. Can you guess why?
They love media, I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess, yeah. There's two key things. One of them is obviously they're a very technologically up-to-date and pioneering country. So a lot of it is around just uses of devices and new media and so on. But another one is, and I don't know the exact details of this, but a bunch of people started podcasting because their main media was really limited, funnily enough, around elections a number of years ago. And it kind of caught on from there. And then the third thing I think is the kind of age demographic of a lot of people there. The numbers are really interesting. But anyway, so in the States, there's still a lot of potential for growth, which is why, you're getting, Bruce Springsteen and Barack Obama doing their show.
Yeah. I'm gonna wait and see what happens. I mean, I'm personally not a huge fan of the direction New Zealand's going in, and I think the priorities are a bit backwards, so I'm not sure if I'm going to stick around. I mean, to be honest, I can do this podcast from anywhere.
Is that, you mean the country in general? Is what you're thinking?
Yeah. So, like, I can move anywhere.
Yeah.
I'll still have this accent, and I'll still be talking. So it'll still be Kiwi Talks. Doesn't matter where in the world I am. Yeah, I mean, but these are all things that I'm just considering. A lot can change over the next few years. But yeah, so I'll just take it step by step.
And where do you think New Zealand's going at the moment that you're not too jazzed about?
I just think that their focus is on the wrong things, when they're talking about like $700 million bridges.
Yeah.
It's just like, I mean, I try, when I see some of the decisions that government makes, I try to put myself in their shoes.
Yeah.
Think, okay, why would they come up with that decision? What brings them to make that decision? But I can't find any logical reason for that bridge.
Yeah.
I'm glad that they've canned it, but it just makes no sense to me. Was this
the bike pedestrian bridge for the harbour bridge? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm not a fan of that. I think what a lot of the politicians are doing and the media are doing is they're trying to create a rift between Māori and everyone else.
Yeah,
I think that's what they're doing, which I don't like.
And how do you think they're doing that?
Well, they're making everything a race thing, the race debate,
right?
And everything about. And the thing is, like, I understand the whole Māori ward thing, but I actually think in the long run it's going to be detrimental to Māori more so.
What's the Māori ward thing?
Oh, well, they have their kind of own health ward.
Yeah.
Yeah, so basically everything gets separated. So, Māori will kind of have their own health system compared to everyone else. But what I think that does is it segregates them more, and it creates more. It kind of leads back to the whole echo chamber thing that I was talking about earlier, where there's just too much misunderstanding.
Yeah.
And I think, and throwing up like Rawiri Waititi, let's change New Zealand to Aotearoa, and the thing is, you can't even have a genuine discussion about this stuff because you get called a racist or a bigot or whatever. And I just, I don't like it. And like even people like Chloe Swarbrick, she's kind of getting involved in this stuff now.
Yeah.
Because at one point I wanted to get into politics. I was thinking, maybe I should get into politics. But I just feel that a lot of those politicians, I think they have a genuineness to help. Yeah. But what it is the toxicity of that environment just poisons them, because you get caught up in that realm.
Well, also the fact that we have 3-year terms, and I guess you kind of go in wanting to do this, that, and the other thing, and there's degrees of success and so on. But then the bottom line is you're suddenly like trying to get into power again, or or you're scrambling to try and get some of the stuff initiated you can into shorter term.
There's too many career politicians, I think, and they're all focused on getting re-elected rather than. That's why you don't see any long-term projects getting approved.
Yeah,
like how long have they been going on about this train down Dominion Road? Oh, it's going to be a tram. No, it's going to be light rail. No, it's going to be heavy rail. They can't make a decision on it. Then there's like the Auckland Port. Oh, we need to move it. Oh, let's move it to Manukau Heads. No, let's move it to Thames. Oh, we don't know what we want to do. It's just make a decision and do it. Like, it's just because every year you go by without doing anything, the cost goes up.
Well, look, I think if you're in Hamilton, I'd probably just give yourself a bit of take it easy on yourself and not worry about what the council are doing in Auckland. You only, as I say, YOLO, as the kids used to say, you only live once. Why get bitter and twisted about a tram on Dominion Road?
Well, as much as, whether people wanted to like it or not, but, Auckland, there's a third of our population in that one city. Yeah. And as we've found out with lockdowns, when Auckland gets affected, there's a compounding effect on the entire country.
Yeah.
And also, I would love to work in Auckland. If there was like a fast train to commute from Hamilton CBD to Auckland CBD within 50 minutes to an hour, I'd easily work in Auckland, no problem.
Yeah.
And that should be available. It's not feasible to have fast rail around the entire country because we don't have the population to support it. But you've got 50% of the population between Auckland, Waikato and Bay of Plenty.
Yeah.
I think that's more than enough to form some sort of rail network, because every time you go overseas and you come back, you feel like New Zealand's just so stuck in limbo. And New Zealand,
it's hard. It's that trade-off between population density and large-scale projects like that.
But it's all about planning for the future, right? I mean, there was that mayor in the 60s in Auckland that wanted to build that underground rail network, and they were like, no, it's going to be too expensive.
It's interesting.
They're kicking themselves now, aren't they?
I lived in Melbourne for years, and it's quite a city that's quite famous for having had quite visionary and quite competent town planners who've also handed off the baton really well to the next individual or group who are responsible for that. Whereas famously in Auckland, outside of any level of skill of planners control, there was such a huge population boost here that basically I think in that period it's all been kind of downhill from there. Like I often wonder why, and I'm not an Auckland native at all, but I often wonder why they put Spaghetti Junction where they did. When you had K Road, Kingsland, Ponsonby, that whole area were kind of one connected area that would seem to sensibly be something to leave. I don't know. That's where I'm not a town planner or a politician.
Well, if you look at Auckland, it's geographically constrained anyway because it sits on an isthmus, right? Yeah. It's got two harbours on both sides. It was not a smart idea to build your biggest city in the most narrow piece of the country.
Yeah,
probably not the smartest idea. And then when you look at the history of Auckland, it was really 4 cities that kind of became one massive city.
Yeah.
And the only reason why I keep bringing this up is because we're going to lose a lot of young people to Australia. That's what's going to happen. And it's already happening because Australia basically beats out New Zealand in most things. I mean, the only thing we've got better than them really is like nature, maybe some sports teams and faster internet.
Yeah.
Which is why I'd like to see the government invest more in technology and gaming. Gaming's huge. It grosses more than television and film combined, and it's something that doesn't hinder us based on our remote location. And it's something where we could reverse the brain drain so people from Australia come here. Because right now, so many of our great people go there because higher wages, better cost of living. Outside of Sydney and Melbourne, house prices are actually far cheaper.
So just before we end up sounding like we're doing late night talkback, have you lived overseas?
No, but I've spent extensive amount of time.
Yeah, no, I think it's time for you to do it. I certainly, going away for a length of time, and actually residing there, I agree. It's something to do. So if you don't have kids as well, it'll be easier. And it sounds like you're at a point where this is causing you some strife remaining in New Zealand. So why torture yourself as well?
I don't want it to sound like I hate on New Zealand, because it has a lot of good things.
Well, I think you just did quite a long, fairly eloquent rant on all the different reasons that,
Well, that's part of the reason why I wanted to get into politics, because I was like, this is just frustrating, because I'm watching like New Zealand kind of hit a standstill. But I don't talk about any of this stuff on my show, right?
Better out than in. These can often be quite therapeutic. I was going to ask you if you've been a guest before. Like, I haven't, probably only once, with Pete Get Flushed's famous Kiwi podcast show, which I think there's only one episode, and it's me. But anyway, I suddenly realised because I did years of radio ages ago, and I suddenly realised, shivers, I haven't actually been in the interviewee seat, I think, ever. And I thought, this actually feels harder than when you're the host.
Really?
No, I thought so.
I'm the opposite. I think it's awesome, because it's so cruisy. When you're hosting, when I have to host, I have to worry about research. I have to make sure that I'm steering the direction of the interview. Making sure that all the sound equipment and everything's working correctly, and then
I agree.
and then after that, once the thing releases, then you have to do a marketing strategy. So it actually is very time consuming. When you're on the other end, all you have to do is talk. So
but I just feel that potentially, like, as we led into this, like, as the guest, you're kind of responsible for kind of providing the answers and being open and chatting about stuff. Like, you've got more on a line kind of in that regard. Whereas, as you say, you can just be the conductor and ask the questions as the host. So how do you find guests? Like, in all of that process, like, I find the hardest thing is cold approaching guests. I don't know why I find that something I just kind of dig my heels in about doing. Do you just flick a message off on social media or whatever, like with some of your bigger guests?
Sometimes. I primarily use an email.
Yeah.
But someone might know someone who knows someone. So they might give me their email, or they might put in a good word for me. I don't generally go on Facebook and Instagram and message people. Sometimes I do, but like, I probably email, LinkedIn, or their website or something.
Okay, so there's the platforms you use, but like, how do you approach it from the point of view of them wanting to do the show? Because there's so many things people get asked for, and especially things they're not paid for.
Well, I have two key principles that I follow in regards to podcasting. And number one is respect the guest.
Yeah.
Respect and honor the guest. And what I mean by that is they are taking time out of their day to talk to you. They could be doing anything else. They could be spending it with family. They could be out at a restaurant or whatever, right? So you need to do the due diligence in terms of research.
Sure.
And making sure that you allow them to say whatever it is that they need to say. So that's why I always try to, particularly with a guest that's done a lot of interviews, I try to make sure that I don't ask them the questions that have been asked before.
Sure.
Yeah. And the second thing is I honor and respect the audience. And that means that, same extent, like, they're taking time out of their day to listen to you. That's why I timestamp every single episode, and I break it down into small little mini subjects, because what resonates with one person might not resonate with another. And that way they are free to consume the content the way they want to consume it, whether they only want to listen to 5 minutes as opposed to the whole hour. But I try to approach every guest as in, look, I want to respect your time. That's why I make my pitches quite small as well. I'll like do a couple of lines, a couple of paragraphs maybe, and then I'll send a YouTube link so they can see it. So within 10, 15 seconds, bang, they know what the product is, they know the format, they know how it all works. Yeah, rather than sending like a whole like massive long email, particularly if it's a guest that's probably quite international or quite big, and they probably get requests all the time.
That's great. And so, like, do you have more successes than kind of polite refusals? Because that's the whole thing, eh? Is like, you can only but ask, and there's nothing lost if people don't want to do it for any variety of reasons. But have you found that you're your hit rate, as it were, is fairly good?
No, that's terrible.
Great. Well,
I get rejected heaps.
Good, good on you, because you've had a lot of guests on, so that's a tribute to your tenacity. I mean, I started off the first year I was doing an episode a week, and then it really slipped on off. So it's great that you're, as you're kind of getting the guests and also hanging in there to try and get the guests. People don't realise there's a big process to this. It is, because it's a solo operation as well.
Yeah, I don't know how long I'll be able to. I mean, I don't even know how I find the energy to do one guest a week. There's sometimes where I do 3 in a week, and then I split it over 3 weeks. Yeah. But that's that's very tiring, because you're basically cramming 3 weeks of research into one week. And there's sometimes where I'll get a podcast literally like one day later, and I've got a couple of hours or something to do research. And this is all while holding down a full-time job as well. So
what do you what other local shows do you listen to? Do you listen to many?
I don't listen to a lot. NZ Everyday Investor is probably one I listen to. Right. Darcy Ungaro, in terms of finance and investing. To be honest, I don't even get that much time.
Because you probably don't remember how when we first interacted with each other, was when I sent you. I said, "Oh, hey, you look like you're doing quite a similar show," and I sent you a message via Facebook maybe a couple of years ago.
Was it?
Yeah, no, you replied. And so have you listened to an episode or two of mine?
Yeah.
Great.
I've listened to a couple of yours, and I listened to the one you did with Pete.
Oh, yeah.
Flush.
He's great, right?
He's a lovely guy, eh?
Because I was going to say, like, the other thing to think about maybe is, you're talking about how you want to go global and this, that, and the other. I think what I've noticed, if you're outside of a media company and you're not working for them, there's real strength in numbers. And I think where New Zealand podcasting will find more of a ability for other media to notice, as well as a wider audience, is people becoming more collective.
I agree. Oh, that's another one I listen to. Department of Conversation. That's the one.
That's a great name. Yep. Names are so important, man. Like I kind of built and I teach a podcast course at AUT, and we have great fun. I do this great fun exercise getting students to come up with names for different topics, because it's such a huge thing to begin with, right? But yeah, Department of Conversation is great. I like Seen and Heard, spelt HERD, which is the New Zealand Beef and Lamb podcast. I think Pete's Get Flushed is really good, although I think Shit Talk would have also been great, but then maybe he narrows his options a little bit. So, and the other, that was interesting with Pete's is, like, I did actually listen to it. I chose one that looked interesting to me, and it was really interesting. They were talking about the portable toilet industry in a pandemic, and how hand sanitizer started getting nicked out of all the units because people were stealing these big 10-litre bags of it, because, it's sort of like toilet paper. You've got to get a whole lot of it. And how do you find the video side of your show? Like, that's something I've not done, and I've noticed that based on looking at iTunes and your ratings there and stuff, it looks like where you're really getting the engagement is people looking at your YouTube channel, right?
Yeah, 90% of my audience is on YouTube.
Yeah.
For a number of reasons. Video is a big thing, and YouTube is basically a search engine. That's what it is.
Sure.
It's a massive search engine, and depending on how the algorithm works, a lot of stuff can get suggested to people.
Yeah.
So it's huge. And that's not to say I don't have an audience on Spotify and stuff like that, but yeah, YouTube is mainly, and the other thing is when I get quoted and referenced on these international publications, they'll post the YouTube link within the article.
Great.
Yeah.
I was meaning setting up the video side of it, I guess the slightly performative aspect of actually having your camera footage, basically having radio with pictures. Like, how have you found doing the video side of it?
It was pretty seamless. I didn't really have a problem with it because I come from doing music videos.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, I can always upgrade my gear and stuff, particularly when I was first doing it. There was a few issues I was running into in regards to lighting, and then and then there would be times where I'd push the record button, and then for some reason, because I'm too busy having a conversation and I'm trying to monitor audio, sometimes the camera would just turn itself off, and I'd be like, oh, what? It's very hard to manage all that stuff on your own. So in some ways, Zoom's a lot easier because I can keep an eye on the video. The camera's not going to die.
It's a minor version of that, but I've had, because I've got notes here that I'm flicking between while I look at you, and I quickly learnt in a real, because what I started, my whole plan, and it turns out you can't be too militantly particular. My whole kind of like ride or die plan at the beginning, before I started, was I'm only going to do face-to-face. Now, obviously, that was before a pandemic and so on. That's changed. Right, so that's changed only recently. But so Zoom is keeping my computer alive. But in the past, often if I forgot to turn off my sleep settings, I'd be like halfway through chatting to someone, and then I'd go, oh shit, I can't see what the next question is, so I'd have to enter in my password and so on. So you learn all these you just learn all these little technical kind of hacks and procedures to make sure things go smoothly, because it certainly is an exercise in multitasking.
And there's other challenges you run into, because when you're doing Zoom, particularly video, you're at the mercy of their audio and their internet connection as well.
Zoom, you mean?
Yeah. If they have a terrible internet connection, then you're going to get all this.
Or like when you tell a guest, like kind of gently, politely tell them the bottom line, which for me is like be in a quiet room and wear headphones, and ideally have a mic other than your laptop mic. A couple of people have turned up, and the two people that have done this were like, should have known better, because their bag was in the music production realm. But one guy...
Oh, yeah, that's just a fail.
Right, so one guy had no headphones and his laptop speaker, but thankfully it's someone I already knew. So I spent the whole intro, like, ribbing him for it, because it sounded really bad, man, like really bad. So you really are, you're right, you really are at the mercy of the other end. But thankfully, the other kind of byproduct of lockdown is even the average Joe generally has a mic other than their computer one, which is quite a new thing for, like, you know, my mum to have at least a gaming mic for her work, which makes it easier. This is going to be the new norm for everyone, so...
Some do. You'd be surprised. There's still a lot of people that don't.
Yeah.
And then it depends on when you're talking to the person. If you're talking to them and they're not really at their house or anything, then... Yeah, but I understand what you're saying. Yeah, so that's why I prefer talking to a lot of gaming people, because they usually have a good setup, or music people. Yeah,
totally, or other podcasters.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And who are you making music videos for?
Well, I'm not making any music videos.
No,
anymore.
Who were you? Who have you made music videos for?
Oh, it's just local people.
Okay.
And I used to do music myself, so I do my own music videos.
What kind of music? Were you
hip hop?
Hip hop, great. Were you a rapper, producer?
Yeah, it's both rapper, producer.
Yeah.
Those days feel like a long time ago now.
What kind of style of hip hop? What era were you making stuff?
Well, I grew up on people like Nas and Eminem and Tupac and stuff, so I'm not really a fan of the newer stuff. Yeah. Where they just mumble. Yeah. Blah, 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 blah. Yeah, I'm not really a fan of that. But I was more into hip hop just primarily because I felt like writing rhymes was like a puzzle. Yeah. Yeah. But what I was finding was I was getting stereotyped all the time, because you tell someone you rap and they're like, oh yeah, he must do drugs. Oh, he must have been to prison. You know, like just wow. And it just got incredibly frustrating. And
sounds like you didn't find the audience that you needed. Sounds like some very narrow-minded people.
Yeah. Well, because I kind of had a love-hate with it. The people that I knew within the circle were fine, but people outside of that circle just assumed. And I got pulled over by police all the time, wearing like a hoodie or a cap or something, and you know, I'd often get like tickets. So,
well, you think that you somehow from outside the car was exuding some kind of signal that you were a rapper from the vehicle?
Oh no, well, it's not. It wasn't that I was a rapper. It was the attire that I was wearing, the clothing that I was wearing at the time. So it just, to police, they're like, you know, it's a red flag for them, and so they zero in on you. Because to be honest, when I've never ever worn that clothing, I never ever get pulled over. Right. Ever.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I hope I've got a hoodie on now. I hope I'm okay when I've got it.
No, but I think you got a hat on. You got your you got a good hat there. That's not like a ghetto hat, so it's okay. Yeah.
Oh, it sounds like the ghetto wasn't for you. So in closing, I looked here. Actually, this is something, from earlier in your career. How was being a loss prevention officer at the warehouse? I'm sure you've seen some stuff.
Yeah, that was interesting.
What did you learn about people?
That people can be just dicks. Like, they really can. Like, people just don't care, eh?
What's
the amount of people that just walk out with stuff?
I was just going to ask that because I've talked to in the pinball circles I'm in, people from all walks of life and occupations, and one of the guys is one of the main loss prevention guys for Bunnings in Melbourne. Yeah. And this is the conversation I had with him. He ended up being like, what was the largest thing you ever saw someone try and make it out with on foot? And so what was yours? What was the largest thing you were like, this guy's just...
Probably a TV, but the funniest was like at the time the warehouse was giving out these kind of fake barcode stickers.
Yeah.
And so you basically put them on an item, and it doesn't matter if you go through the checkout, it's still going to beep on the way out.
Right.
And so at the time, I noticed a lot of school kids would come in and they'd steal a lot of food at the food aisle.
Yeah.
So I used to put a lot of these barcode stickers. And then there was one time this kid, I don't know how many she had, and then like she tried to walk out. Now, obviously, you're not allowed by law to touch the person or grab them or anything. Yeah,
this is
like
a big
that,
thing, right? Yeah.
Yeah. But I was like, no, screw that. Screw that. They don't know that. So anyway, these kids walked out, and the alarm went off. And then I said, bring it back. And then they ran off, and then I chased after them. We're not supposed to chase after them, but I chased after them.
Well, just having a bad day. Like for me, like, no, I don't think that's the other thing with those roles is like, you have to be on quite a good wedge of money to put yourself and basically your life on the line for someone who might have a knife or whatever, right?
I think the law needs to be changed.
Yeah.
I think like if you're going to walk out and steal something, and then you're going to be like, oh, no, my rights, you can't touch me.
Yeah.
I think that's a load of rubbish. I think that the person should be allowed to grab you or do something, because the problem is if there's no repercussions for these people, then why do they have any incentive to stop doing it? So, yeah, I mean, I used to see it all the time. I got some weird stuff too. Some like lady just walked up to me, hi, can I have your number? And I'm like, no. No, thank you.
Well, that's right. That's a heady day in the warehouse for her. So in closing, well, there you go. Maybe if your podcasting leads you internationally, sounds like maybe the US is the place for you, and then there's firearms. So that's often the solution for those, sorts of situations.
Yeah, well, every country has its pros and cons, I guess, and you just have to roll with the punches and adapt, I guess. I'm a pretty adaptable guy.
Okay.
I couldn't be in a relationship with an Indian if I wasn't adaptable.
Okay.